The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly, silent and dark. The battle-scarred fleet of the Galactic Alliance moved cautiously through the sector. They had been hunting for enemy ships, expecting remnants of a pirate group or maybe a stray rogue vessel. But what they found instead was something terrifying. Commander Velrek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Carrack's Pride, his sharp eyes fixed on the glowing red signal on the holographic display. It was not moving. It just sat there, silent, waiting. A single warship, alone. Hume identified. The ship's shape was strange. No known markings, no communication signals. Just an eerie, dark silhouette against the stars. It was enormous, far bigger than any warship the Alliance had ever built. Velrek narrowed his eyes. "Scan it again," he ordered. His second-in-command, Officer Ralvik, tapped rapidly on his console. A moment later, he looked up, his face pale. "Sir, the scans can't penetrate its hull. We don't know what it's made of." Velrek frowned. "Impossible. Our sensors can read through anything." Ralvik swallowed hard. "Not this, sir." A nervous murmur spread across the bridge crew. Ships didn't just appear out of nowhere. And if their technology couldn't analyze it, then it meant only one thing. It was more advanced, far more advanced. Velrik's grip tightened on the armrest of his chair. Was it an enemy vessel? A new secret weapon? If so, why was it just sitting there, silent? "Try hailing it," Velrek ordered. Ralvik nodded and sent out a universal greeting signal. No response. He tried again. Nothing. The mysterious ship remained motionless. Velrek felt unease creeping into his bones. This was wrong. Every instinct screamed at him. This wasn't just an unknown warship. It was a predator watching its prey. Then, without warning, the ship moved. Not like normal ships. There was no engine burn, no acceleration curve. It simply shifted, like reality had been around it. 1 second, it was thousands of kilometers away. The next, it was right in front of them. The bridge fell silent. Velrek felt his blood turn to ice. That was impossible. No ship could move like that. Ralvik's voice came out as a whisper. "Sir, it just broke the laws of physics." Velrek barely heard him. His heart was pounding. The crew was frozen, staring in horror at the screen. Then, something even worse happened. The ship sent a signal. Not words, not a request for communication. A single overwhelming pulse of data flooded their systems. The screens glitched, the lights flickered. Every sensor, every scanner, every single piece of technology on the ship screamed in error. Then, it all went black. The bridge was silent. Only one thing remained on the screen. A single line of text. "Leave," or "BERASET." Velrek stared at the message. Ralvik's voice was barely audible. "Sir, what do we do?" Velrek clenched his jaw. Whoever this warship belonged to, they weren't asking. They were giving a command. And something told him, disobeying it would be a mistake. A heavy silence filled the Carrack's Pride. The bridge crew stared at the ominous message still glowing on their screens. "Leave," or BERASET. Commander Velrek's fingers tightened around the armrest of his chair. His mind raced. No enemy had ever dared to issue a demand to the Galactic Alliance. Who did this mysterious warship think it was? A lesser commander might have turned away. Velrek did not believe in ghosts. He believed in power, strategy, and force. "This is a bluff," he said, his voice sharp and commanding. "No single ship, no matter how advanced, can threaten an entire fleet." Ralvik hesitated. "Sir, I don't think this is a bluff." Velrek turned toward his second-in-command, eyes burning. "Explain." Ralvik licked his dry lips. "Sir, our systems are still rebooting from the data pulse. That wasn't just a warning. It was a demonstration. That ship can hijack our technology in seconds. What else can it do?" Velrek's jaw tightened. He hated fear. It was poison to discipline. He looked around at his officers. Their hands twitched over their consoles, their breathing uneasy. They were afraid. Fear leads to hesitation. Hesitation leads to failure. He could not allow that. "We are the Galactic Alliance," Velric declared, his voice steady. "We do not run from shadows. If this ship wants us gone, let it prove its strength." He turned to the weapons officer. "Lock target on the warship." A collective gasp spread across the bridge. "Sir," Ralvek's voice dropped to a whisper. "That may not be wise." Velric glared. "Are you suggesting we kneel before an unknown enemy?" Ralvek didn't answer. He didn't need to. The fear in his eyes said enough. Velric clenched his jaw. "Cowards. Fire warning shots," he ordered. "Minimal power. Let's see how this so-called warship reacts." The weapons officer swallowed hard, then obeyed. The Carrack's Pride fired. Bright blue energy beams surged toward the mysterious warship. The shots flew fast, accurate, and direct. No ship, no matter how advanced, could dodge beams moving at such speeds. But then, the impossible happened. The energy beams never hit. They just vanished, like they had never existed. Silence. Ralvik froze. His hands trembled over his console. "Sir," his voice was barely above a whisper, "where did the shots go?" Velric's breathing slowed. His brain screamed for a rational answer. A cloaking field. An advanced shield. Some kind of trick. Then, before anyone could speak, the warship moved. 1 second, it was still. The next, it was right behind them. A deep guttural hum filled the air. It was not a sound from their ship. It was coming from outside. Ralvik's console flashed red. "Sir, something is happening." Then the lights flickered. And suddenly, the enemy warship spoke. A voice boomed through the ship's systems. It was cold, mechanical, and emotionless. "You were warned." Then, a single pulse of energy struck the fleet. It was not a weapon. It was something worse. Every system shut down. Every weapon went offline. Every ship in Velric's fleet went dark. For the first time in his long career, Commander Velric felt true fear. Because now he realized the truth. This was not just a warship. It was something far beyond their understanding. And they had just made an enemy of it. The Carrack's Pride floated lifeless in the void. Across the entire fleet, engines were dead, weapons offline, shields useless. Commander Velric's heart pounded in his chest. Every screen on the bridge was black. The only sound was the hushed breaths of his crew, too afraid to speak. One pulse. That was all it took for this mysterious warship to disable the most advanced fleet in the Galactic Alliance. Ralvik's fingers flew over his darkened console. "Sir, He stopped, swallowing hard. "Sir, I can't restart anything. We're completely shut down." Velric's fingers tightened around the armrest of his chair. He refused to believe it. No ship had this kind of power. This was impossible. "Backup systems," Velric snapped. "There must be something still online." Ralvik shook his head. "Everything is frozen, sir. Our AI, communications, even life support is running on emergency power. Whatever that pulse was, it didn't just shut us down. It took control." Velric's pulse spiked. He had faced warlords, rebels, and pirate kings. But nothing like this. This was not a battle. This was a message. The warship had not fired a single shot. Yet it had won. A soft, eerie hum filled the bridge. It was coming from outside the ship, a deep, unnatural vibration that crawled into Velric's bones. And then, the screens lit up. Not their usual systems. Just one image. The warship. Up close, its surface was black like a void, lined with glowing crimson veins pulsing like a heartbeat. There were no visible weapons, no markings. It was a phantom, a ship built for terror. Then, a voice cut through the silence. It was not organic. It was not machine. It was something in between. Your fleet is now irrelevant. Velric's breath caught in his throat. Ralvik's face drained of color. Sir, I think it's talking to us. The voice continued. Your weapons do not matter. Your technology is dust. You exist at my mercy. Velric's fists clenched. Who are you? He demanded, forcing his voice to stay strong. The warship's red veins pulsed. Who I am does not matter. What matters is that you have made a mistake. Velric felt a sharp chill run down his spine. Then, the warship began to move. Not forward, not away. Through them. The Carrack's pride and the entire fleet were frozen in space, unable to move as the phantom vessel passed through their ships like a shadow. Not around. Through. No alarms, no impact, like it wasn't even there. Then, it was gone. Just like that. The screens returned to normal. Systems flickered back online. Engines roared to life. The fleet was back, but nothing felt the same. Ralvik turned, voice shaking. Sir, what just happened? Velrec didn't answer, because for the first time in his career, he had no idea. But one thing was clear. This warship was beyond anything the galaxy had ever known, and it had let them live. Not because they were strong, but because they were beneath it. The aftermath of the mysterious warship's appearance left the fleet in a state of eerie confusion. Commander Velrec stood in front of the main console, his fingers hovering over the controls but unsure of what to do next. The fleet had regained power, but something deep inside told him it would never be the same. The images of that black void ship, silent, ghostly, and powerful, kept flashing in his mind. The crew stood motionless behind him, each one digesting what they had just experienced. There were no explosions, no battles. Yet they all knew the stakes had been raised. Ralvik, his voice barely above a whisper, finally broke the silence. What do we do now, sir? Velric turned, his face pale but hardening with resolve. We don't do anything. Not yet. His voice sounded different now. It was calm, but there was an edge to it. The fleet had been tested, and they had come out alive, but that was not the victory Velrec had hoped for. The warship hadn't destroyed them. It hadn't even attempted to fight. It had only shown them its power. Prepare for a full sweep of the area, Velrec ordered, regaining his commander's composure. We need to know everything about the path that ship took. It couldn't have just disappeared. It must have gone somewhere. Ralvik nodded. Yes, sir. As the crew scrambled to follow orders, Velrec couldn't help but feel the weight of the silence. It wasn't just the silence of space. It was the silence of fear. How could they fight something they didn't understand? Meanwhile, across the galaxy, whispers had begun to spread. Word of the mysterious warship had reached the outer colonies, and soon enough, it was the only thing anyone could talk about. The galaxy was no stranger to conflict. Wars had been fought, alliances broken, and empires risen and fallen. But this was different. This wasn't some alien force trying to conquer the galaxy. This was something far more sinister. It was a warning. And Velrec knew it. He had seen the power of that ship firsthand. They hadn't even seen it fire a weapon, yet it had reduced an entire fleet to nothing more than a group of helpless ships. There were no visible scars on the fleet, no damage. But the warship's power was far more terrifying than any weapon they had ever faced. And it didn't need to destroy them. It only needed to show them that it could. Velrec walked to the edge of the bridge and stared out into the vastness of space. The stars seemed so distant, so insignificant now. The fleet, which had once been so powerful, seemed like nothing more than a small collection of specks in the great expanse. What was it about this warship? Why had it come here? Why had it shown them its power and then simply disappeared? Sir, Ralvik's voice interrupted his thoughts, and Velrec turned to see him standing next to the tactical screen, which now displayed a series of strange, encrypted data streams. These signals, Ralvik said, his voice trembling slightly. "I think they're from the warship." Velric's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Ralvik pointed to the screen, which showed a series of pulsating light patterns. "These signals, they're unlike anything we've ever encountered. They're not normal comms or scans. It's almost like it's watching us." Velric stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. The patterns on the screen shifted, almost as if the ship itself were responding to their movements. A shiver ran down his spine. It felt alive. "This isn't just a ship," Velric muttered, his voice low. "It's something else." Ralvik turned to him, eyes wide. "What do we do, sir?" Velric didn't know how to answer. The truth was, he wasn't sure what to do. The situation was far beyond their understanding. But there was one thing that was certain. The galaxy had been marked. If this warship had shown up once, it could do so again. And next time, it might not let them walk away. "Contact the High Command," Velric ordered. "We need every resource at our disposal. We're not just facing another enemy. We're facing something that could change the future of the galaxy, and we need answers before it's too late." Ralvik nodded and began sending the message. Velric turned back to the view of space, lost in thought. The eerie silence of space seemed to close in around him. The ghostly warship had given them no choice but to follow. It had shown them its power without lifting a finger. And now, Velric was certain of one thing. Whatever that warship was, it was only the beginning. The message to High Command was sent, and Commander Velric didn't waste a moment. The future of the galaxy had suddenly become uncertain, and with it, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. His mind raced as the thoughts of what could lie ahead haunted him. He had to understand what they were up against. It wasn't just a warship. They had already seen that. But something more. Something ancient. The signals, the strange encryption, the fear that had gripped the fleet after the silent warning. It all pointed toward something that was not just threatening, but dangerous. Velric turned to the crew, his voice a steadying force amidst the growing panic. "I want every analysis team focused on this warship's last known trajectory. We need to know everything we can about its origin, its purpose, and who or what is behind it." Ralvik, still shaken from their first encounter with the ghostly warship, nodded solemnly. "Understood, Commander. We'll be on it right away." But as Ralvik and the others scrambled to follow orders, the sense of unease only grew stronger. Velric couldn't shake the feeling that they were not prepared for what was coming. The warship had shown its power, but not its true strength. That terrifying thought hung in the air, suffocating them all with its weight. On the other side of the galaxy, High Command had received Velric's message. The Council, a group of the most influential military leaders, sat in a darkened room, staring at the data that was now being analyzed. The reports of a human warship showing up on the radar were hard to believe. For years, humanity's military technology had been regarded as primitive, barely a challenge to the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. But something had changed. The very appearance of the warship, the signals it sent, the way it had simply vanished. It was beyond anything they had ever seen. The room was filled with silence as the council debated their options. Some argued that it was a fluke, a freak occurrence. Others worried about what it could mean. After all, humanity's technology had always been underestimated. But this was different. No one had ever seen anything like this before. General Aaron, a longtime leader known for his cautious approach, was the first to speak. "We cannot ignore this. If this warship is human, it means humanity has far surpassed our expectations. We need to prepare for the worst. We need to know what we're dealing with." Another officer, General Kira, voiced her concern. "But how can we possibly prepare for a force we don't understand? The ship didn't attack. It didn't even engage. It simply observed." General Aaron looked over at the tactical screen, where Velric's fleet was shown in its current location. "If they can show up like this without warning, we must assume they can do so again, only with far more devastating power." Back aboard the fleet's flagship, Velrek's thoughts mirrored those of the Council. Something was wrong. But how could they defend against something they couldn't even fully understand? The eerie silence from the warship had been its first warning. But the fear was growing. Velrek felt it in his bones. This was not just an isolated event. The warship was a message, and they were being forced to listen. Suddenly, the tactical screens flashed to life, pulling him out of his thoughts. A new signal was appearing. This one, different, a different pattern, one that seemed to pulse and shift like living, breathing energy. "Commander, we're receiving another signal from the same coordinates as before," Ralvik called out, his voice tinged with disbelief. Velrek moved quickly to the console, his eyes narrowing at the screen. The signal wasn't just random. It was patterned. It was purposeful. Someone, or something, was sending a message. But what was it trying to say? "We're not alone," Velrek muttered to himself. This is no coincidence." His hand hovered over the controls, and the crew watched as the message played out on the screen. The words, encoded with strange symbols, began to appear. They were nearly incomprehensible, the language alien, but something about it felt familiar. For a moment, Velrek's mind reeled. He didn't know what it meant, but there was one thing he knew for sure. This warship was more than just a ship. It was a warning, and it wasn't here by accident. Ralvik leaned in, studying the symbols. "Commander, what are we looking at? This isn't a normal comm signal. It's different." Velrek stood motionless, his thoughts racing. "I don't know, but I'll figure it out." As the crew worked to decrypt the message, Velrek's mind returned to that first encounter with the warship, the silent, powerful presence that had shown up out of nowhere. It had been toying with them, testing their limits. And now, with the new signal, it was clear this wasn't over. This was only the beginning. For the first time since the warship appeared, Velrek felt the cold weight of fear settle into his stomach. He had no idea what was coming, but one thing was certain. The warship was only the first wave. Commander Velrek stood motionless as the mysterious symbols flickered across the screen. His mind raced to make sense of it all. The human warship had appeared from nowhere, observed them in eerie silence, and now it had sent a coded message. But what was it trying to say? Ralvik's fingers danced across the control panel, running every decryption program available. "Commander, I'm analyzing the symbols. It's not a language we've seen before, but it's structured. It has a pattern." Velrek leaned over, studying the message as it unfolded. The characters were strange, yet oddly precise, as if they had been created not for communication, but for calculation. It was like a war map, a grid of coordinates and formulas. Then, suddenly, a breakthrough. Ralvik's eyes widened as the decryption software processed part of the data. "Sir, it's a tactical display." Velrek's heart pounded. "Show me." The screen shifted. A three-dimensional projection appeared before them, revealing their entire fleet formation. Every ship, every defensive line, every weakness. The human warship had scanned them, mapped them, and now it was sending it back to them. The crew went silent. "Commander," one of the officers whispered, "does this mean they've already won?" Velrek clenched his jaw. No, it couldn't be. If the humans had the power to destroy them, why hadn't they done it already? This wasn't an attack. It was a warning. Suddenly, an alarm blared. Ralvik gasped. "New energy readings. The warship is moving." Velrek snapped his head toward the viewport. The massive, dark warship, which had remained motionless until now, had come to life. It, tall, sleek, and ghostly black, began to glow with faint blue patterns, like veins of fire pulsing across its surface. It wasn't just active, it was preparing for something. "Commander," Ralvik said, his voice trembling, "I think it's powering up its weapons." Velrik's fists tightened. "Shields to full. Prepare all weapons." But before his orders could be fully carried out, something terrifying happened. The human warship disappeared. not in the way a normal ship would. There was no jump signature, no warp distortion. It simply vanished, like a ghost fading into the void. The bridge was dead silent. Ralvik's voice broke the silence. "It's gone." Velric refused to believe it. He turned to the sensor officer. "Scan again. Find it." The officer hesitated, then checked the instruments. He paled. "Sir, we're detecting something inside our fleet." Velric's blood ran cold. Inside. Before the words could fully register, chaos erupted across the fleet. Aboard the dreadnought Tyvran, one of the largest battleships in the fleet, Captain Jorvik stood on the bridge of the Tyvran, watching his crew scramble in confusion. His ship was one of the most powerful in the Armada, equipped with the latest in plasma artillery and high-density shielding. And yet, at this moment, it felt as fragile as a piece of paper. "Where the hell did it go?" Jorvik growled. The sensor officer's voice trembled. "Sir, I think it's..." Before he could finish, a shadow fell over the viewport. Jorvik turned. His heart stopped. The human warship was right there, above them. It had reappeared inside the fleet, mere kilometers from the Tyvran, its massive hull blocking out the distant stars. It had moved without a single detectable trace, bypassing every defense, every sensor net, every system. Jorvik had fought countless battles, but never had he felt true fear, until now. The warship's hull pulsed, its energy signatures spiking. Then, a deep, low-frequency vibration filled the air. It wasn't a normal sound. It was felt more than heard, a presence that made the very bones of every crew member shudder. Back on Velric's ship, Velric's eyes were glued to the tactical display. The human warship had jumped, without a warp drive, without any known propulsion system. It had moved in ways that violated every law of physics they understood. Then, the message changed. The symbols on the screen shifted. The language was different now. Simpler, easier to read. The computer's automatic translation finally caught up. It displayed only one sentence. "You are not ready." Velric felt the weight of those words. They weren't an attack. They weren't a declaration of war. They were a judgment. The human warship wasn't here to fight. It was here to assess them, to determine whether they were worthy of standing against whatever power humanity had unleashed. Velric barely had time to process the message before another alert screamed through the ship. The warship was moving again, but this time it wasn't coming closer. It was leaving. One moment, it was there. The next, it was gone. Just like before. Vanished. The battlefield, once a stage of impending war, was now eerily quiet. The crew sat in stunned silence, staring at the empty void where the warship had been. Ralvik finally spoke. His voice was hoarse. "Commander, what do we do?" Velric exhaled, steadying himself. He turned to his officers. For the first time in his career, he did not have an answer. But one thing was clear. The battlefield would never be the same again. The bridge was silent. No one dared to speak as they stared at the empty void where the human warship had vanished. The battlefield, once filled with tension and fear, now felt like an open wound. The enemy was gone, yet its presence lingered, heavy and suffocating. Commander Velric took a slow breath. His mind raced with unanswered questions. What had just happened? The warship had demonstrated abilities beyond anything they had encountered. It had bypassed their defenses, analyzed their entire fleet, and then left them with a message that echoed in his mind. "You are not ready." Those words were not a threat. They were not a warning of an imminent attack. They were a statement, a cold, calculated judgment. Humanity had looked at their fleet, studied their capabilities, and decided they were not worth fighting. Ralvik broke the silence. "Commander, what do we do now?" His voice was quiet, uncertain. Velric didn't answer immediately. He turned toward the crew, each of them still frozen, their hands hovering over control panels, waiting for orders. For the first time in his career, he felt the weight of true uncertainty. He had been in wars, led battles, outmaneuvered enemies. But this was something else. This was an unknown he couldn't control. "We return to the High Command," Velrek finally said. His voice was steady, but there was a heaviness in his words. "We report everything we saw, every movement, every signal, every reading." Ralvik hesitated, then nodded. "Understood, Commander. But do you think the High Command will believe us?" Velrek's jaw tightened. That was the real problem. Their entire fleet had just been outmatched by a single warship. Not destroyed, not attacked. Outmatched. The High Command would not take that lightly. Some would demand immediate retaliation. Others would deny it had even happened. "Their belief is irrelevant," Velrek said. "The truth doesn't change because they refuse to see it." Ralvik swallowed hard, nodding. "I will compile the reports. Every ship in the fleet is sending in their sensor logs. The data is overwhelming." Velrek didn't need to see the data to know what it would show. The human warship had moved faster than physics should allow. It had vanished without a warp signature. It had predicted their fleet's formations with pinpoint accuracy. It was the most advanced vessel they had ever encountered, and it had not fired a single shot. A new thought crept into Velrek's mind, chilling him more than anything else. What if this wasn't even their strongest ship? What if the humans had more? What if this was just a scout? The realization sent a shiver through him. If a single warship could cripple their confidence without firing a weapon, what could an entire human fleet do? A sudden alert broke through his thoughts. "Commander," a voice from the control station called out, "we're detecting an energy distortion, exactly like before." Velrek's breath caught. His head snapped toward the viewport. The crew tensed, their eyes glued to the vast emptiness of space. Then the darkness shifted. Something emerged. The human warship was back. The same eerie silence filled the bridge. No weapons fired. No warnings came through their comm systems. It simply existed, its dark hull almost blending into space itself. Velrek's hands curled into fists. Why had it returned? "Commander," Ralvik's voice was a whisper. "The warship, it's hailing us." Velrek's heart pounded. His hands moved before he could think, opening the transmission. The screen flickered. For the first time, they saw a human face. A woman, calm and composed, stared at them through the screen. Her uniform was sleek, bearing no visible insignia, no signs of rank. But the confidence in her eyes made it clear. She was in command. She studied Velrek for a long moment. Then she spoke. "You have seen enough," she said. Her voice was smooth, neutral. "You know what we are capable of." Velrek held her gaze. "What do you want?" The woman tilted her head slightly. "Want?" She seemed almost amused by the question. "That depends on you. Your fleet stands at the edge of something greater than you understand. What comes next is your choice." A chill ran down Velrek's spine. "Are you threatening us?" The woman gave a small, knowing smile. "If we wanted to threaten you, you would not be speaking to me right now." Silence stretched between them. Velrek knew she was right. This wasn't an invasion. It was a test. Ralvik's hands were shaking over his control panel. "Commander, what do we do?" Velrek inhaled deeply. Then, slowly, he straightened. "We listen." The woman nodded, as if she had expected that answer. "Good," she said, "because the galaxy is changing. And if you don't adapt—" She leaned forward slightly, her expression turning serious. "You won't survive." The screen went black. A second later, the human warship vanished once again. Velrek stood frozen. Every officer on the bridge stared at him, waiting for a command. The battlefield was silent. And for the first time in his life, Velrek realized something terrifying. The greatest threat to their survival wasn't war. It was being left behind.